Okay, so you know those spaces where the floors and the walls and even the built-ins, they all look like they're made from kind of one continuous material. So there's no grout lines, there's no transitions. It's just kind of one smooth sculpted surface. So that can be achieved with a product called Microcement. So here's how we're going to break this down, because pretty much all the videos I watched before I installed Microcement in our studio and in our house kind of assumed you already knew a lot about the material itself and just jumped into the how-to. So hopefully this is more of a big picture view to help you decide if it's right for your project. And we'll start with why you would use it. Then we'll look at what it is, so what's kind of actually in the mix and how it behaves. After that, I'll show you where I got it and the main options you'll see there. Then we'll look at color and finish choices, because that can really change how the kind of the whole character of the material. And then I'll walk through some of the application tips and some things that I learned the hard way doing it myself. And finally, I'll talk about the maintenance and kind of long-term performance of it. So let's start with why you'd use it. If you like the look of concrete floors or kind of that seamless Mediterranean plaster kind of feel where the floors and walls and built-ins kind of all flow into each other that I mentioned earlier, Microcement might be for you. So it's minimal, durable, waterproof, it's easy to clean, it can work almost anywhere. So floors, walls, countertops, stairs, you can put it over tile. So a super friendly material to work with. It's monolithic, minimal, no grout lines like I mentioned. So it's the look of concrete, but without kind of the thickness and weight. You know, I think concrete in general feels pretty timeless to me and modern, especially when you combine it with kind of materials that warm it up. And so this is basically in that same vein. So what is it? Microcement is basically cement with these polymers added that keep it super flexible and crack resistant, even applied at very thin layers. So instead of pouring a heavy slab of concrete, you're only going to build this up like 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. And so it's been used for a long time in Europe, but it seems to be catching on now more in the States. So where do you get it? There are pre-mixed options from different companies that come kind of in buckets, ready to use. I haven't used those myself, so I can't speak to them. I used Surecrete, and I found that from an online store called Concrete Exchange. Side note, Concrete Exchange was really helpful answering my questions. I have no affiliation with them, but I wouldn't hesitate to reach out if you have questions about their products. They were very responsive. It comes in a dry powder, so like a bag of concrete, and you mix it with water until it's the consistency of kind of thinned whipped cream, I guess. Another side note, while I'm thinking about mixing, if you're applying it vertically, like on a wall, I would mix it a little thicker, so not quite as much water so that it doesn't slide off the wall. Just a little tip. Color and finish options. The base product comes in a white or gray, but you can change the color in a couple of ways. So there are pigmented powders that you will mix the powder in with the water, and then you'll mix in the Microcement, mix it all together. That way you're going to get kind of a natural, kind of more mottled look. There's going to be more variation, kind of some visible kind of trowel texture. I would suggest definitely making a small test batch of this with the color, use the right ratios, but the color chart and the actual color that comes out I found were fairly off. But the output is a kind of very soft, it's kind of that Mediterranean plaster kind of look. And in that case, I think you would probably just use a clear sealer over the top of that. And I'll talk about sealers in a second. The second option is to use a pigmented sealer. So the sealer itself has the color in it. And that way it looks more like a polished, kind of painted concrete. It's going to be more uniform, I think probably more glossy, more like a solid surface. That is going to hide imperfections better, I found, and gives kind of a sleeker, a little bit more polished look. I think both looks are very different. So you're going to have to kind of decide for yourself which way you want to go. We did both. For the floors, we used the pigmented sealer because we wanted it just kind of to all be a solid color. For our bathrooms, we mixed in a powder and just used a clear sealer. And in those, it does feel like a more mottled, kind of textured, a little bit softer. One tip on the pigmented sealers, they rarely have samples of those. Every time I asked about samples, you couldn't get them. And their color chart, again, I feel like wasn't quite the exact same as the final product. So this color, we use Sun Buff, which looks fairly tan in the chart, but had a lot more pink in it when we ended up using it, which we really ended up liking. But just be prepared to try to actually look up actual people who've used a color in their spaces online. See if you can find some, because samples are going to be hard to find. Okay, application and installation and some tips. So I think there are more pros and actual companies popping up in bigger cities specializing in doing microcement. I'm in a kind of a small town. I did it myself, so I can't give you a price on labor. And there are way better, more detailed how-to videos out there. I'll link to 2 or 3 that I found really helpful. But here are the basic steps and some of those tips. So for prep, you're going to want to make sure you do the basic steps and make sure everything's clean, kind of taping off things that you don't want to get cement on. But with wood structures that you're going to be going over, whether those are subfloors, stairs, countertops, you're going to want to make sure that the wood is as kind of stable as possible. So put some extra screws through the plywood, go into the joists. If it's a countertop, make sure that it's fastened well. You're just trying to limit the amount that the wood is going to move around with expansion and contraction. This stuff is very flexible, and amazingly, I haven't had very many cracks at all, and the ones I have had were my fault. But just try to make sure it's as stable as possible. Then you're going to want to prime it. So I think you can just use a regular kind of acrylic primer on wood. I used a fluid applied weather barrier I had left over from the outside of our house. And I think companies make kind of specific primers that will adhere to like tile or other things you might want to go over. But basically you're just trying to kind of put some waterproofing on the substrate so that the micro cement isn't absorbing any of its water into it. Then you're going to want to apply fiberglass mesh across the entire surface, not just the seams. Most of the DIY videos I've seen, especially the ones that come out of the United States, skip this step, and you shouldn't. Another tip, use a plastic trowel or the kind of one of those squeegee trowels. They call them magic trowels, instead of a steel trowel, especially for your final coat. I found that steel can kind of burn the surface and kind of leave some dark marks, which isn't what you want, especially if you're doing a clear finish. And amount of coats. So for the base coat, I use Surecrete's Sure Broom, which is a larger aggregate product, which makes it a little stronger. And just do that to where it covers the mesh, covers the fiberglass mesh. And then I did 2 finish coats of the Surecrete Microtech, which is a very fine, smooth product. I also found that when you're troweling, I had done a bunch of lime gypsum kind of veneer plastering on our walls, and in that application you kind of have longer strokes. When I was doing that on the floors using the microcement, I found that kind of shorter strokes worked better. You just kind of blend stuff in as you go. You don't need to kind of make these wide sweeping kind of gestures. But watch those other videos, watch it from 3 or 4 different people and see and try to get a sense of how everyone is doing it similarly. Now here's another important tip. So between coats, there's a window of time where it's firm enough to walk on in your socks, but it's not fully hardened. And that's the moment that you want to go in and kind of scrape down ridges with your trowel and smooth things out. I've seen a lot of videos that show people trying to sand this stuff after it's fully dried. And if you have a good product, a good microcement, it's not going to really sand, especially with kind of just a regular sanding pad. Those diamond sanding pads made for concrete, that can help smooth it out, but I'd recommend trying to get it smooth and fix those inconsistencies while it's still not fully cured. So depending on the temperature and humidity, that could be I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes after you put it on to 45 minutes to an hour. Just press your kind of finger into the concrete, and if it's not really indenting, it's probably safe enough to walk on with your socks, and just go over all those problem areas and just kind of smooth things out and take off those ridges. Okay, maintenance and longevity. So we used FloorTec 6 Nanocoat, I think is the name of it, which was a clear, kind of glossy sealer. It was easy to roll on. They make a bunch of different clear sealers for concrete. I think all of them are probably going to work basically the same. You may look for one that's very, waterproof if you're doing kind of the inside of a shower or shower pan. But pretty much all the ones I've seen have been waterproof and make the concrete impermeable to water. And for our kind of pigmented sealer, we used the Surecrete, I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it up on the screen. And so this has the color in it, has a nice glossy kind of surface, and again, looks kind of like a colored, polished concrete floor. And longevity. So it's concrete. It's very hard. Once you put the sealer on it, you can just sweep it, mop it. It's very difficult to kind of mess up. It doesn't scratch very easily. If you kind of rolled something super kind of sharp and hard on it, you probably are going to mess it up. But in general, it's one of the most durable materials I've used on anything. I don't think you would need to reseal it unless it's a very high traffic area, or if it's kind of inside a shower where you need it to be extremely waterproof. You might need to kind of reseal that every 3 to 5 years, I would guess. But in general, it's one of the most durable products you can get. So my take, is it worth it? I, as you can tell, really like it. I think it gives you that kind of polished concrete or kind of plastered look without needing a slab. It's really versatile. You can use it on walls, on tubs, countertops, stairs, even furniture. And I think concrete and plaster are just, they've been used for centuries for a reason. They're simple, durable, kind of honest materials. And I think microcement is just kind of a modern way to get that same effect in a lightweight, kind of waterproof, and kind of DIY achievable way. So if you want something minimal, tough, and I think architectural, I think it's a great option for you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll try my best to answer them. And if you've used it, I would love to know what you think of it and what your experience of it was.